Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. My name is Oksana Davidova. I'm here with my co-host Margarita Moshe. Today we have an amazing, resilient woman with us. Her name is Nina Khaimova. She's an attorney in her own right. She practices estate planning, foreclosure defense, and litigation. Hello, Nina. Welcome. Thank you for being with us here today. We always do start off with, how you started out, where you began, what made you want to go into the legal field, and why be a lawyer, pretty much.
So, around like late teenage years, right? That like our parents are starting to encourage us to pick a career path. And around like 16, 17 high school years, I was like, I'm gonna be a pharmacist. So yeah,
Margarita.
I decided
Margarita's a pharmacist.
right, you are. Mainly that was because my family kind of touched the medical field. And then pharmacy just seemed very attractive to me. But then there was like a switch where I was like, I don't know, like everybody's going for pharmacy. I mean, and most of those people that decided to do pharmacy, they're successful pharmacists today. But I was kind of like, no, I'm different. And at the same time, my dad kind of tells me, you're a fighter. You're not one to like stay in one place. You're about fairness. And I definitely see in you that you're gonna like stand your ground and fight for what you think. And if there's ever a situation, you're gonna bring fairness to it. So he said, you should be a lawyer. And I was like, oh, okay, perfect. That's what I'm gonna do. Let me see what it takes. And at that point, college applications started. So I decided to go to St. John's. My major was legal studies, which is basically a free law major. Um, Getting into law school was a little bit rough. I had a good GPA in college, but the LSAT was just not my type of test. I didn't do well, and but I applied to about 10 schools, and one accepted me. So I definitely want that message to be heard because I think a lot of people who are striving to be attorneys, there's either, that GPA that's not doing it for them or the LSAT score, whatever it is, you still have to try it. And, I said to myself, if I don't get into it, because it was literally rejection, decline letter after decline letter after decline. And I didn't apply to like Harvard. I applied to the schools that I thought would accept me. And then Toro was the only school that accepted me into their part-time night program, which later they allowed me to do the afternoon program. Um, and that was that. And I went to law school. I graduated in this always confuses me because I had gotten married after my first year in law school and I had a baby in the middle of my third year of law school. And I took a semester off to have the baby and then I went back. So 2011, 2012 was the year that I graduated. I think that to answer your question in short, my family had a lot to do with my choice in becoming an attorney. And they are still until today that push that, you know, it's just such pride in now that they have a lawyer in the family that motivates me.
No, for sure. That's amazing, your journey that you had gotten married in law school, you had your first child in law school, and you took a break. I know a lot of girls, especially in our community now, they are not really sure how family life is going to play into that, or they're already married before they start law school. And if they do decide to take a break, I see some of them don't actually go back. How did you have the stamina and motivation to, you know, after having a child, it's such a bonding experience. How did you leave your child and go back to school?
It's definitely, I mean, he was a February baby, so I was with him because the following fall I went back to school. I mean, and I think I went once a week because at that point I had very little bit left to finish, and I took some summer classes, so it was gradual. And I would hear people tell me like, why aren't you getting a babysitter and going back to school? Because once you take that break, you're not gonna go back.
Hard.
You're gonna want to stay home with the baby, or you're not gonna take this seriously, and eventually this is just gonna fall through, and you're not gonna get your law degree. But that was never an option for me. It was sort of like, this is the goal and this is what I'm going to get. Um, I can't say I did it all by myself. That's just it would be, not the truth. I had a great support system. Anytime I talk about it, I always say my parents were my initial, push. Then when I got married, my husband was always supportive. And I'm glad you brought up that moment, that point, because when it came time to study for the bar, the bar is only twice a year, February and July.
Right.
So I took the February bar, and by that time, my son was turning 1. And in order to study for the bar, you have to basically crawl into a cave for 2.5 months and not come out and study from morning until night. I didn't see my baby for 2.5 months. My parents, my in-laws, my husband, they were taking care of him. And then when it was all over, it was hard. It definitely was hard to be away from him, but like I said, it had to be done. And I passed the bar the first time because I said to myself, I'm not doing this again if it doesn't work out. But I passed the bar, and none of that is ever regretted. I think it was definitely a journey, a challenging one at it. But once you come out on the other side, you look back and you say, I did it. That's the feeling that I wanted to feel.
Yeah, no, I think it's very enlightening, especially for us as women, because it's different than a man when they pursue their goals and their career. It's not as, not to discredit them in any way, because men are very important in family life as well. But for women, we take things a little bit more with, at heart.
Yes.
So it's not as easy for us to sometimes leave our kids or our family familial responsibilities. So, and it's very inspiring when we hear stories like this, because it shows to you that, perseverance, determination, you were going to get to your goal no matter what. You said it was not an option for you. You didn't leave the question of, am I going back or not, open. So you took that and you said, I'm going full force no matter what. And you had an amazing support system. So that led you where you did, and you did amazing on the bar. A lot of people don't pass the bar in the first time.
Yes.
And that's really something to be said about you. So tell us, how did you evolve really into the work that you do now?
My gosh, that's a longer journey and a lot of lessons in between. Um, at the time that I graduated law school, it was post like 2008 crash, 2009, like that difficult time in our economy, and it was very difficult to find a job. And I didn't have a job lined up out of law school. I had a baby at home that, and now I'm a lawyer. So it's like, okay, do I go on these interviews and tell them that I have a son at home, that, I have to be a mom? It was kind of a point in my life where for a few months between taking the bar and finding employment, it was kind of like a shift of how do I um portray myself, right? Because it's very important to me that I'm a mom and I have to be there for my son and a wife, but it's also important to me to jumpstart my career, and I want to do well. Um, and so the first job I took was a foreclosure firm. They did foreclosures for banks, and those type of firms were very busy at that time.
Yeah.
They were very busy at that time, and I was just so happy I got a job. Um, I was really happy I got a job, but it was still a struggle because I wanted, and I had to leave at 5 o'clock. So when I would get up and leave, when other attorneys were required to stay, their schedule, if there was one, was 9 to 6, and I had to ask for my schedule to be 8 to 5 so that I could come home and, make it in time. So that was like the first sort of like challenge that I had to get adjusted to, right? Um, Eventually didn't work out with that firm, and I went to a smaller foreclosure firm doing the same thing. And again, same idea, you come in and you have to explain that, yes, I am qualified to do this job, but by the way, I might be limited with time because I want to go home and be with my child. So those two, so there was about 3 foreclosure firms that I worked for. The last one was amazing. It was right around the corner from my house, so it worked out well. By that time, I already had a second child. So, um, I do want to make this point because it played such a big role in my years of experience. Was, you know, there are times you show up to an interview and the employer looks at your resume and asks point blank, "What's with the gaps?"
Yes.
There's no other answer that I could give, and it had to be an explanation of, well, I had a baby. And so, and I kind of didn't stop there, and I said, but maybe I'll need an adjusted schedule in the office, but also, if possible, give me access from home so that if I'm not able to finish something while I'm here, I'll finish it on my own time, whatever, when my kids are asleep already.
Mhm.
So, some employers were great and understanding. Others, not so much.
And this is pre-COVID.
This is all pre-COVID. I was all pre-COVID. And I even had a moment where I was faced with a lot of honesty, and it was sort of like, you don't want this job. You don't want to stay here in the office until whenever. You're going to want to go home to your baby. And when that was said to me, I kind of had like this double feeling. One, I was like, oh, thank you for the consideration. But two, I was like, wait, why are you telling me what do I want and what I should be doing? I'll decide that. You give me the opportunity. If I fail, that's a different story. But, like you kind of can't take something away from me because you identify me as something within your definition of what I am. But I'm glad you brought up COVID.
Pre-COVID, before we get to COVID,
Yeah.
I think what you're getting at, and I felt the same. I had a lot of issues like that too, because ironically enough, when I had just graduated law school, I just took the bar. I was taking the bar pregnant, passed the bar, and then when I was looking for work, I called the admissions counselor. I was like, "Hey, listen, I need to work." She's like, "Okay," but I was like, "How do I explain the gaps?" Right? And she was like to me, "Don't say anything. Just say it was what did she say? Medical family leave." I said, "Well, why am I lying about it?" She's like, "Well, you're not lying about it. You're just not saying that you had a baby." I was like, "But I don't understand. The baby's always gonna be there. It's not like I'm dropping off the baby anywhere. So tomorrow if the baby gets sick, am I saying a medical leave?" I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. So I found it, and I graduated a little bit after you, and I found it to be like so insane that in this modern day in of of women working, this isn't the first time women became lawyers, just so we're clear. And I was like, you want me to come in and lie about the fact that I had a baby? It's not like I didn't do anything illegal. And it was so profound to me, the concept. So I said, no, I said, I refuse to do that. So anytime I would go on a job interview, I was very honest about it. I was very forthcoming about it. And I also had such a hard time because the first question I would get asked, well, like, well, until what time can you work? I'm like, well, normal jobs.
Yeah.
Again, this is me as an attorney with a baby at home, paying the babysitter. I think the babysitter made more money than I did at that time.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, well, until what time do I have to work? And they're like, well, I'm like, court ends at 5, right? Because I don't think any court's open until after 5 unless you're in criminal court. And at the time I was doing what was I doing? I was looking for interviewing at different firms. Like I would take any job, whatever it is. And so I'm like, 5 o'clock, and they're like, well, yeah, but then you have to come back to the office and, do this and that. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, I have a computer, a laptop. I could get a lot of this stuff done at home. Same thing, like you said, when the kids are sleeping.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the time you get these looks. I think that some people were honest. Some people just give you looks like, well, we'll get back to you. And you already know what it's all about. You're like, this is a job interview. I feel like I'm explaining myself, not my skills, but myself.
Yourself, yeah.
And it was so
Your
sad,
choices, yeah.
but this shouldn't have to be. I think, and this was about like a decade ago, almost 10, 12 years ago, something like that. And I think a lot has changed since COVID. And it's sad that COVID made us change
Yeah.
things to some extent. But I'm sorry to continue.
To your point, about not saying it, every interview I went to, I was very forward with it.
I
If you're
agree.
gonna make a
I agree.
decision not to hire me because of that, then that's okay. And the reason why I made sure to tell them, it's not just that there's a gap and I had a baby. No, I have kids at home. They get sick.
Yeah.
I have to call out. So you should know that up front because I'm probably gonna have more sick days than somebody who's not a mom yet or a dad yet. Right. And so for the most part, people were understanding. I really found it comforting when I would come back from being at home for a week with kids with the flu. I would come back and my coworkers would genuinely ask me, "How are your kids feeling?" So I don't want to take away from that because that compassion exists
Yes.
also.
To some extent, yes. There are people who are understanding, but I felt like, it's a toss-up. Some people were more concerned about the bottom line as opposed to like how much you're gonna work, how much you're gonna produce, and how much you're gonna make for me,
Right.
to be fair.
Right.
And some people, yes, there's compassion, and I can actually speak to that myself because I got so lucky. And we were talking about this in my industry and how we did it, and then I was talking to somebody, and we'll get into that later. And you can change certain things in the industry and stand your ground, which is what I think you do with time as you get more comfortable. And I think that's what you were getting at. As you get more comfortable in the legal, with your skills and your experience, you come to the point where like, well, okay, if it's not a good fit, no problem, I could just go someplace else and they'll hire me.
Exactly. And the other point is that I think when you do have family and with kids, you're a lot more conscious of your time.
Yes.
And while maybe your employer wants you to stay at work past 5 o'clock, if you show your employer that things are done, they're done adequately, they're done on time, they're done right, and you get that successful result, for your client, there's no reason to make that, an identifying factor of why, my work is maybe like, if anything, at that firm where I worked, where I was really successful, like I was one of the best attorneys. And nobody ever like, they knew I had kids, they knew it was important to me, but it was never something that was like, oh, well, she's out sick again. So I think all of it plays in together. I think it's definitely a time management skill that it is so much sharper than before we have kids.
No, so definitely is.
Yeah.
So how has I know you're in practice on your own right now. So moving into that question, how has that experience shaped the way that you wanted to practice on your own, and at what point did you realize that I'm not a good fit for working for someone anymore and I have to go out on my own?
So I never realized that. The situation was that I worked in a firm in the city, again, foreclosure litigation for banks, and COVID happened. But before COVID, actually, me and my husband would have a continuous debate. He would say, go on your own. You're an excellent attorney. There's a lot of talent. You are limiting yourself while you're employed and working for someone else. I would say, no, I don't want to go on my own because it creates an insecurity of income. It creates instability in my hours. I get up in the morning, I go to work, I leave work at a certain time, I come home. I'm guaranteed a paycheck. I know my work, it's mostly the same thing. I'm comfortable. Like, stop.
Right.
But then COVID happened. And I think when COVID, like the shutdown happened, and at the same time as the shutdown was announced, there was an order saying that all foreclosures are on hold. So I no longer need it for my foreclosure law firm that I worked at, and I was the first one that was laid off, or one of the first ones that was laid off. And at that point, my husband was like, it's not a debate anymore.
Right.
It's a sign.
This is it.
This is a sign.
What else are you going to do? You're not going to stay at home. We all know that you're not going to stay at home, even though the kids were home. And he started working from home because of COVID. So that was the turning point. It was definitely the area of the unknown, a big, what is it? How do we say it? It's the fear of the unknowns, right? Is holding me back, right? Um, and it came back to that whole idea of if I'm going to do this, I have to be successful. It's not an option. This is the goal. I always enjoy doing estate planning. It was actually the reason why I uh, was drawn to it was from foreclosure. Nobody's ever gonna think that that's the way that that connection happened. But why does a lot of times a foreclosure happen? Generally, we think, okay, somebody defaulted on their mortgage, we foreclosed on them, house goes to auction, whatever. My last firm that I worked for, they did tax lien foreclosures. And basically, a lot of the cases that I saw was, parents owned a home, they died, the kids don't live in the house, but now the kids own the house. Maybe there's a mortgage, maybe not, but because we did the tax lien foreclosures, we did the foreclosures in connection to the property taxes. So this family lost their parents, kids live elsewhere, they don't pay the taxes, they don't pay the property taxes. We take that house and foreclose on it. But in order to do that foreclosure successfully, an estate has to be set up. So that's when the thinking started. Well, if the parents put the house into a trust and or created a will and explained to the kids how to take care of it or so on and so forth, maybe the kids would have been able to preserve it and save it. Or if the kids get together and, now sell the house. So all of this like kind of started thinking, and I saw the back end of the process where we as creditors would take the matter into surrogate's court. And we would have to find the heirs and we would have to file a petition, and eventually one of the heirs would get up and say, okay, I'll be the administrator or whatever, there's a will, whatever the case may be. But that's kind of like the perspective that I saw it from. And I found it really, really, really interesting because every family had a story. It wasn't just a house that we were taking away and foreclosing on. It was a story. There was, it was very relatable.
Right.
And so that was what I set out to do, but I knew I couldn't do that right away. And what's interesting, and I am going to mention his name because I owe it to him that was how I started. There's a famous community accountant. His name is Sihon Akilov. He does my dad's taxes, and my dad is a small business owner. So my dad said, okay, you don't have work, you're out of a job. Well, guess what? I'm hiring you. And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? He's like, all those COVID loans and PPP and all of that, do that for me. And I was like, how do I do that? So he's like, go call my accountant. He has all the paperwork. I picked up the phone. I called the accountant. He asked me, are you a lawyer? And I said, yes. He's like, great. You want these loans? Because I'm not, because he's getting flooded at this point, like COVID hit. He's still working. Plus, it's March, so it's tax season.
Right.
He's getting flooded with these questions from all these. Thankfully, our community is full of business owners. So he's like, I'm getting flooded with all these questions, and like, I don't know how to apply. This is all new. So, do you want these referrals? I said, listen, I'm a lawyer. It's not necessarily legal work, but I think it would be great work. It would be great for you to give me this work because I would get it out of your way. It would be good experience for me to meet people, build connections, do this service for them, and then move it to the next of, oh, hey, by the way, I could do real estate. I could do estate planning. Any other legal questions you have? And that basically created a chain reaction because a lot of them were business owners. I helped them get a loan, but they had a commercial lease that they were default on because it was COVID and they didn't pay. So I would do commercial lease review for them. If they were being sued for rent, I would defend them. If they are leaving and terminating their lease and going into a new lease at a new location, I would help them negotiate that. And from then it kind of picked up. So that's how I started. And that's where I learned that being on your own creates a great level of control. You're able to control who your client is. You're able to control and manage your time better. I learned so much more, and I'm still learning every single day while practicing on my own
Yes.
than having been employed. And that's where, that if there was ever any insecurity, it kind of transitioned into like this push of, okay, you have no choice but to really be confident and knowledgeable right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was the only time in my career where I felt that confidence, that security, and my knowledge. And people would literally pick up the phone, hanging up, how do I handle this? I know you know this. And it just, like I said, chain link reaction.
Wow, that's an amazing story that really kind of, I mean, together with the support of your husband, with as being your cheerleader, constantly in your ear, go out on your own, and plus the situation, the circumstances was really a right equation to get you into, being a little uncomfortable, but also growing at the same time. And a lot of people don't realize that you have to be uncomfortable to grow. You have to feel like you need to get a little out of your skin because being in a firm, sure, it's great. You got benefits, you have your sick days, you get a stable paycheck. You're worried about, am I gonna make money tomorrow? Is there gonna be constant flow of clients? Are we gonna establish a reputation? All of these variables can be very scary. And then you say, you know what? This is the situation, and kind of like pushed you into where you needed to be. And look at you now. You have a flourishing practice. Tell us a little bit about your practice and all the things that you do.
So it's interesting. Sometimes I feel like I've missed a few steps because I am solo practitioner at its core definition. I don't have staff yet. But a lot of times I'm kind of like, I see the prosperity of the firm, thank God. But I'm always like, but I don't think that everyone started this way. I'm sure, there's a lot of solos. I think the general thought is, well, if I'm gonna go on my own, and I hear this all the time, especially from non-attorneys, where it's like, open up an office, do a build house, have that presentable office with staff, with a receptionist and a secretary and paralegals. And I don't have that traditional, like idea of a firm. Um, my clients have direct access to me. I don't have a front desk. They call my cell phone, they text me. So it's definitely, I think my practice is definitely the non-traditional way, and it's flourishing. Again, thank God, knock on wood, there's clients coming my way. And I think what it has to do a lot with, where I think it's mostly non-attorneys who think it's not as presentable when you're on your own. I don't know if I'm explaining it the right way, but it's not really the shiny objects that brings in the clients. It's our honesty, our approachability, our being trustworthy, and carrying with you that level of integrity that makes the client feel comfortable and confident that will give them the result. Um, it's definitely in the works. I'm giving myself a few years where I will have that office, I will have that staff, but I kind of do think that I did it the other way than the way people think it's generally done. Um, and both ways are equally challenging. I'm still working when my kids are sleeping. And it's it's a whole other ball game than whether you're working for an employer or have staff that answers to you, because I think I'm a lot more busier, and I call myself the system, whereas I'm trying to get myself to a point where I had systems that were working in place and work is getting pushed out the door, but right now I'm the system.
Well, I think what you said, a lot of what you said I could resonate with, because having to go on my own a year and a half ago, we think we know so much when we work for somebody else, right? You're like, I got this, I know the law, I know this, I know this. But then what you don't realize is that when you go off on your own, you kind of stop practicing law as much as you're doing so much of this admin and, busy work. Because now, like you said, you got to do the office, the build out, the staff, and the phone lines, the internet, and all this. And you're like, I just wanted to practice law. And it combining with all that, yes, it becomes like a whole other thing you're thinking about. But the one thing I know, one of the reasons why I also went off on my own, what I was beginning to see, which is I think you just said, is that you have, and I'm more of a in practice where it's more we have more clients, right? So we are very busy in terms of the clientele. And one thing I was beginning to see was that a lot of the clients were complaining because they don't have access to the lawyers, right? And you could only be accessible so much, right? I guess it depends on the practice area you're in. That's why we have like paralegals, and they trained paralegals who know what they're talking about, who know what they're doing. And of course, if they don't give legal advice, they just, do the admin stuff to a certain extent. And then if anything needs to be, I always tell my paralegals, make an appointment and I'll speak to the client directly, as it should be. But the type of area you're in, you're very into, like you said, you do a lot of small businesses. So it's like direct to consumer approach, right? From consumer to attorney. And I think that's why you've also been very successful. I mean, I sent clients to you. I sent clients. I was like, you're gonna love her. She's gonna explain it to you from A to Z.
Yeah, actually, I did ask you recently.
Yeah,
You
remember?
said,
And I
oh,
was
you,
like,
you gave me three. You gave me three possible
I
ladies.
did.
She was one of them.
Oh, really?
Yes. I actually, funny enough, my husband needed help with a commercial lease, I think it was, and I was like, okay, here, go call Nina. I was like, why can't you do it? I'm like, because I can't. He's like, saying why? I was like, well, I could do it, essentially, but I was like, there's a conflict of interest, So I said, here's an attorney who's more than capable. Go deal with her and she'll help you. And interestingly enough, I remember one time he's like, I stopped by Nina at her house to drop off the paperwork. I was like, well, that's amazing service.
Yeah.
Right. He just had to drop off the paperwork because that he signed, but whatever it may be. And I was like, and I know she did it as a favor to me. I was like, he'll be fine. He's normal, you never know sometimes. But I have to say, the one thing I have seen, and I'm sure you've heard this too, and I speak to attorneys who go off solo on their own, whether they're entrepreneur, solo practitioners or with a partner. One thing I have noticed is that in your type of line, like, trust and estates and foreclosures and litigation and business law and everything, a lot more businesses and people want to speak directly to an attorney, right? They don't want the fluff in between. They don't want like staff. They want to be like, it's because everybody's like, time is money. We don't want to spend time like make an appointment to do this. Everybody wants an answer today. Like AI, right? I want an answer today. So have you seen that in terms of like how you've become so successful in terms of like, because you're so approachable and you give a response, that same time they call you. So there is no like, oh yeah, let me make you an appointment or unless obviously it's a more complicated issue.
So, look, clients, they come to us with their stories, they come to us with their problems, and they're looking in us for that person that's gonna fix it. It's not ideal, but at least we're a solution-based career, right? So, and thinking from my perspective, if I'm dealing with something, whether it's as simple as going through a closing, or God forbid somebody lost a parent and they don't know what to do, they don't know what steps to take. There are people that I've met, they don't like to talk about wills and trusts and setting up their estate before they pass away. So they come to us with a sense of anxiety. Okay. And I think to all of us attorneys, anxiety is very familiar. We are always anxious. We are always, trying to get through a stressful situation to a better solution. And so for me, it's like if I'm giving you the indirect, or I'm not accessible to you, I'm elevating your anxiety. They're waiting for me to call them. They're Again, right now this is how the firm is functioning. This is how I'm doing it. If in the future it becomes different, there's nothing wrong with that. But I just think that, if I get that text message, it's just so much easier and quicker for me to respond with, here's what's going on. Or that phone call, this is what's going on. All right, at this time, it's not like right away I get to it and, I might have other things that are going on. But I give them a concrete roadmap. Here's what we're going to do, so that it gives you that sense of calm, right? We're therapists too.
Yeah.
We don't really
Yeah.
lawyers.
Yeah.
But in a way, they're dealing with a problem and they're looking to us for us to bring them back into one piece. and give them that security. So I think that component helps them, which, like you said, brings people in. And if I ever have to reach an attorney, I automatically think, oh, I'm probably going to have to, do this and do that. They're probably busy. They'll probably call me. Maybe they won't call me back. I have to call them. That's that's the conception that I have of how it would be. But the fact that I'm taking that factor away from the clients and making them feel comfortable, I think it helps them. And my firm, my clients are 90% referral based. So that means I did something really good for one client that made it, important enough for him or her to refer me to someone else. So that to me is a reflection of what I'm giving them.
No, it's not, and solo practitioners are actually quite common. A lot of people don't see it, or they don't. I don't know if maybe they don't look for it because they, like, you're right, they look at the stigma of the office, the
Yeah.
space, the staff, and all that stuff. But there are a lot of solo practitioners, and they're very well versed, they're very talented in their field.
Yeah.
So how do you see, like, the projection of your practice growing in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
I definitely want to hire staff. I think at this point it's already a necessary. Um, as much as I'm this type of personality where I think if I don't handle it, it's not going to be handled, 100%. I think it's important, and whoever thinks that way, I think it's important to start to stay away from that. Um, I started reading Robert Kiyosaki's books. Uh,
Rich Dad
Rich
Poor Dad.
Dad, Poor
Yes,
Dad,
I read
the
it.
cash flow quadrant. And in one of these books, he wrote something that really got stuck with me, and it almost kind of gave you like that shosh, like a wake-up call. The cash flow quadrant, I'm not gonna get into the details of it, but there in one of the quadrants, he talks about the self-employed, the solopreneurs, and the attorney. He said, you guys do not have a system. You guys will be successful doing what you're doing, how you're doing it, but eventually there's just going to be hopefully not, but it's going to be a burnout, because you're going to come to a point where you're overwhelmed and you can't do it all by yourself anymore. Either, when I read this, I don't know if he made that suggestion, but I thought, okay, either I'm going to retire, which is okay too, or I'm going to take what I've built so far and transition it into a set of systems so that things start to work on their own with staff, with, not just spreadsheets and maybe some sort of case management where, I'm doing my billing, but a lot more systems than that. And um, I have a coach who said it's a great thing that you're on your own, because once you get to that level where you have the staff, you have the office, you have the systems, you already know each area, even if it's the reception, even if it's the intakes, you know how to handle it. So you'll be able to train, you'll be able to oversee, you'll be able to guide. And I want to tie this in with the areas of law that I practice. I know a lot of people say, "Oh my God, Willie, you do so much," which I think it's not so much. I tend to just break it down a lot. Like people say, I practice real estate, but real estate is so big. I handle closings and I do commercial leases. I don't do evictions. And I do litigation and I do foreclosure defense. See, this is what happens. But I think it's all tied in together. And then the estate planning obviously has that real estate component to it. All of these areas of law, as the client base grows, it can be broken down into a system of work, and the assistance that I would provide to my clients would be it would be smoother, as opposed to, okay, what are we doing next? What did we do? I find most of my day I'm answering emails versus writing, a memo of law for a litigation file for a motion. So that way there would be a litigation department that would handle that aspect, and I could still answer emails all day. But definitely has to work out in the next 3 to 5 years where it's staffed, system based, because the work is coming in. I don't like to say no to clients unless it's something I can't handle.
And to your point, I think that it's our mom in us, especially in women, that we want to try to tackle everything ourselves. If you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. And it's just like you see that there's a pattern of things not being done maybe exactly the way that you like, or in the sense of, the way that you would want it done. And it kind of like, you know what, I'm better off just doing it myself. But delegation is actually very, very important. And not just delegation, but proper delegation.
Yes.
Like everyone has a talent of their own. You have to kind of find everyone's niche and allocate what that person can handle. So, that's a big, call of my husband. He always says you have to delegate properly. You have to delegate properly. And I was always like, he said, your biggest issue is like you always want to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And I said, it's right. I don't know if it's like the control part of us. Like we have to kind of like, we control the family, we control the household, the kids, and then it kind of sticks with you. But I think the burnout that we feel will be so tremendously lightened once we can learn to delegate properly.
Absolutely.
I think it's very important, especially for our younger girls in our, in the generation that's coming lawyers. They do have a lot of questions about how am I going to manage this? How am I going to manage family, juggle children and a career? And to that point, it's very important to let them know that, eventually you're going to want to be on your own, and it's going to provide you the flexibility that, you're going to seek in your family life. So,
Yeah. To your point that, there's this generation, and I've had this asked, a few times, like, how do you do it? Because the thought is a lawyer is like away from home and, very career driven, works late hours, but the answer is, and the funny thing is when I was going for it and whoever was an attorney and I would say I want to be an attorney, the automatic like knee-jerk reaction was don't do it. And I still remember that being said, and I kind of look back. I don't want to say that to somebody. If somebody asks me, should I do it, whether it's a woman or a man, if you want to do it, go do it. Who's gonna stop you? We live in a country where possibilities are limitless. It's another thing that some of us take for granted is we live in a country, and that was one of the reasons why my parents chose to immigrate, aside from mass immigration, right, from the Soviet states, is education. I don't think I would have been an attorney back where we came from. I don't think I would have been able to do that.
I wouldn't have met.
Right? So go do it. You have the opportunity. You have all the tools. Everything is accessible. If you don't want to do it, if it's not your calling, don't. But if you do, you'll have a family if you want family. You'll have kids if you want kids. You'll have a legal career. You'll be successful at it. It's all about, like how I said in the beginning of the interview. You see the end, like you not the end, but you see that goal being achieved, and you see that as your target. You're gonna do everything. You're gonna take every step to get there.
I think this is a problem where they're, especially women. And I know this because when I was starting out and, I was told like, well, there's days you have to work late, or there's days, we don't know how late it's going to be. And before I was in law school, I remember we were on this huge, we were doing this litigation where we were working till midnight. Right. We were doing case assembly. I mean, I wasn't married. I was young. I was just like, okay, this is fun. We're sitting there assembling for trial. Midnight, we get a taxi home to be car service home.
Order snacks.
Yeah. We had order food, order snacks. We were sitting deep into, and I fell in love. You don't understand. I fell in love with litigation at that time and moment. I'm like, this is what I want to do. Like, it's like you're sitting, through piles of documentation, thinking of arguments, listening to lawyers, thinking of arguments. It was just so much fun and entertaining. And then I thought to myself when I was in law school, and I'm like, I want to do litigation. And I've always wanted to litigate. That was my thing of litigation. And then I look back, and I remember when I was like pregnant, and I was like to my husband, how the hell am I going to litigate till 12 o'clock? I'm like, oh, this baby's going to come. And then what am I doing? He's like, I mean, look, you could do whatever you want to do, but think about it. Nobody's forcing you into anything. And it made me choose a career, and I don't regret it till this day, because I always said this, and people like, you could have done litigation, this. I was like, what? I chose my kids. And then I chose my career because I'm like, I could do anything. It doesn't matter. And I'm blessed enough to say that, doing what I do, I still experience a lot of litigation. Sometimes I work late. Sometimes, I'm done early. And in my trajectory, it was great because I'm like, courts close at 5, do whatever you want. There's always the next day. I mean, we have deadlines that we adhere to, but I think it depends on what. Don't feel like you get stuck, right, into one particular thing. And you could always transition, especially, like what you said. Just listening to you, like I'm always transitioning and always picking up different types of things and learning from it. And I think this is if anything from today that we want to put out there is that you can always transition,
Yeah.
always find a different path in the same legal career. And you'd be surprised when you stand up for yourself, you can change the
That's the
complete trajectory of
make a
things.
difference.
Yes,
You
yes.
have that. I don't think we all say it, but I think the reason why we all look, this profession is challenging. But and when people tell me like, oh, you're a lawyer, it must be so hard, you have to get all the 8 hours. And I'm like, but how's that different from a nurse doing 12-hour shifts?
No.
And that I could not do that. Like, I wouldn't do that because it's so much more challenging. 12-hour shifts, you're legitimately away from your family for days, right? So I think that distinction has to be made that this career is no more challenging than a different career, whether it's a doctor or a nurse or whatever, right? A dentist, whatever. And then to your point with dealing with different fields of law. Right now, you're doing what you're doing because that's your choice around your family with young children, right?
Yeah.
I always say that I think that as time goes by and our kids get older and self-sufficient and married and have their, we're gonna have more time, okay? And it might be that we would want to consider a different field of law. I know in law school it was always said like, oh, try to stick to one. And I'm not saying go from practicing real estate closings to like criminal defense. No, not something in, even if that's okay. You learn.
Right.
I don't know if I would do that, but maybe I'll leave everything else and just do estate planning. Or the other way around, I'll stop doing all the transactional work and just do litigation because now I have the time. And now I can be, writing motions and having trial and all of that stuff. I think that's the beauty of this career is our flexibility, our fluidity to be able to jump from one thing to another.
Yes.
And then getting it done. I don't know. It's like this great feeling of accomplishment, even if it's like getting a motion granted for my client. Like it's just really, really rewarding.
So tell us, we all have that one client, that one situation, that one case that kind of always stands out for us, and we just can't seem to knock out of our heads. Give us your most craziest situation case that you've handled or most interesting one. Tell us a little bit about it and how you handled it.
Well, confidentiality has to be preserved. As I feel like if I go into details, I don't want to reveal. But hypothetically, because I do litigation and estate planning and real estate, I got a one-of-a-kind case where a house is at issue and all the family members want it, but the person who owns it right now wants it to go to a class of people instead of, let's say, directly to, you know, the kids. Okay, whether it's donating it or giving it to generations down, in the family, whatever it is. So believe it or not, I'm dealing with litigation that um, we want to make sure that the client gets what that client wants in the end. Um, and to answer your question, I think that there isn't that one case that stands out. I think it's those clients that kind of stand out and that you feel a connection with.
Right.
And you kind of, not to say you make it personal. It's not about making it personal. It's about, um, if I was in this situation, how would I want this to work out? And from there, we kind of like, at least I do, I start to think, okay, this is my plan. This is what I would want for this client. And, you know, you worry.
Yeah.
You worry because it becomes almost personal.
Yeah.
This happens with estate planning. You see it a lot. It's kind of like, what if this happens to my family? God forbid. Oh, but I've seen cases where parents have passed away and the kids just can't seem to
Get along.
forget to get along, like determine who gets what, and they fight in surrogates court, and there's litigation in surrogates court over how the estate should have been handled. It's very sad to see, but those are the cases that stand out because it hits home.
Yeah.
It hits home. We have kids. We are kids of our parents. And to me, those are lessons that, foreclosure, okay, we know what could happen. A closing, yeah, we get it. We're closing on a transaction, but the estate planning and the estate litigation are those cases that, like you said, they stand out because it becomes relatable. It becomes like, what would happen? What would I do? How would I handle it? How do I even talk to my parents about it? How do I talk to my husband about putting together a will for ourselves? I go out there and I tell people, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. But for some time, I didn't have my own estate plan in place. And I like to share this story, and I hope it's okay because I don't want to deviate too much from the question, but my husband and I decided to go on vacation, just the two of us, which is not very often for us. I know there's plenty of couples who travel a lot, and they should call me. But hey, it was like the night before our flight, and I said, something's wrong. This doesn't make sense. We're going on a flight. We're gonna come back safe and sound and say, and everything's gonna be okay. But what if is you hear stuff on the news all the time?
Yeah, of course.
And I said, and it's both of us leaving, and the kids are staying in the care of our parents. Of what are they gonna do if God forbid? I'm not gonna say it, but what if God forbid, right? And so I said, we're gonna write a will. We're gonna designate an executor. We're gonna create a trust in that will.
You did it right there and then?
I did it the night before our flight. I designated a guardian.
Did you do it?
I did. I wrote my will. I wrote my husband's will. Like I said, the important part of it was designating a guardian. I called the guardian and I said, if, then, okay, I went across the street. My husband's relatives live across the street, made them witness the will. And, I have to update it now because at that time I had 4 kids. Now, thankfully, I have 5. But the fact that I have it and the fact that the guardian knows that the kids go, to be taken care of, and we have a house and it's going to be in a trust for the kids. It's a plan. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not going anywhere until 120.
God willing.
But,
You have the peace of mind.
I've seen that. Yes.
I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's not like, because I've heard this before. It's not about, why are you burying me? It's not about burying you or anything like that. It's about
Yeah.
just being like, we always have to protect ourselves, because we never know, it's not in our hands, and we should always, especially when there's minor children involved.
For us, yes, with minor kids, I think it's, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but when I didn't have it, I felt like I did not do what was my responsibility to do. We leave the house, we make sure the kids have food, we pack them lunch, we do this, that, we do all the necessities. But if God forbid something like that happens, we didn't take care of that when we could. It just doesn't, and I'm one of those people who didn't have it done. I should have had it when I first had my child. So I think it's very important to do it. The other aspect of it, and I know a lot of people talk about Medicaid planning, which is important. I don't necessarily want to dive into it. I think what I see in a lot of clients, so let's say it's the post, like somebody passed away and there's a lot of fighting, or there's not a lot of fighting, but they still have the back and forth deciding because the parents didn't do anything. The parents could have passed at 90s, whatever. They lived a good life. But now the kids are on their own. Sometimes when our parents are alive, we still have their guidance. But when they're no longer with us, I think there's susceptibility of the kids getting into friction. We'll call it that, not fighting, friction. And then I see those clients that they're parents and they say, we're going to take care of it now. If I have adult children, this goes to that one, this goes to this one. Don't down close deal. No questions. Well, I think that is the smartest thing to do.
I agree. So we're gonna close today with the question that we try to ask everyone. For those who are watching, especially our youth who are interested in going into this type of law, what would be your suggestion to them?
This area of law, as in estate planning,
Yes.
or for the other
Foreclosures, estate planning.
Real estate.
What would be my advice? Go for it, right? So definitely do it, as I said before. Thicken up your skin. And that I say with a lot of experience where I've had people being very forward with me. I'd have people notice that I was sensitive and push the buttons to get a reaction. We definitely have to have thick skin. If you're not, and you don't have that right away, work on it to get tougher. Whether it's the judge, whether it's opposing counsel, even if it's co-counsel or clients, whoever, keep that firmness. Nobody will push your buttons. And that you can handle anything: foreclosure, estate planning, litigation. You're good to go.
All right, that's great
Thank you.
advice. Thicken up your skin.
But I think that applies to any area in law. You have to have
Yeah,
thick
you have to have
skin.
thick skin.
Otherwise, you're not gonna get far,
No,
unfortunately.
especially not in court and
Yeah.
litigation,
Yeah.
that can be,
Yeah.
you don't want anyone walking all over you, that's for sure. We want to thank you so much for coming out here today and spending some time discussing your journey. It's been very inspirational to hear from you, a wonderful mom, daughter, a successful attorney, solo practitioner. With all these, you juggle so many different acts. It's remarkable, and I want to commend you. And
Amazing.
actually think that it's
super high.
no, it's really great to have you and your perspective, and we really appreciate you coming down here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, we wanted to say thank you to Nina Khaimova, who joined us today, and for the discussion we had. We will have Nina's information on the bio, in the comments. Please link and subscribe. And if you have any questions for Nina or ourselves, please put them in the comments and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Thank you.